Jillian, according to new polls from the Wall Street Journal, swing state voters give former President Trump the edge, a broad one on the economy and border security. And he will likely make his case next hour on how Vice President Harris has bungled both issues. Karl Rove is a former Deputy White House Chief of Staff and a Fox News contributor. We'll get to what the president's going to say on immigration in a second, but first to the economy. This was something that former President Barack Obama intimated about in his speech in Pittsburgh yesterday, when he was literally calling out black men, saying, quote, "We have yet to see the same kinds of energy and turnout in all corners of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. I also want to say that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers." There's no question that Harris is starting to bleed support among young African-American men. Our Richard Fowler said last hour, that's because there's a lot of people in that group who like Donald Trump's message on the economy and jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was an unfortunate tone by the former president. It was sort of like lecturing. It was sort of like, why don't you boys get your act together? And instead of making a case that that the future would be brighter and better with the policies of his favored candidate, Kamala Harris. Yes, the Democrats are suffering. She is suffering particularly from lack of black enthusiasm being driven by younger black males who say the economy was better when Donald Trump was president. She has a problem with youth voters, young voters who his enthusiasm levels are low. And she's seeing defections in the Latino community. The numbers that are coming out of these polls in states like Nevada with significant Hispanic populations is that she's winning that vote, but she's winning it by nowhere close to the margins that Joe Biden won them by in 2020.
Yeah, well, John Kerry won them in 2004, but Bush came close enough that he retained the presidency. Trump in Aurora today in the next hour. This idea that he's going to announce, if he becomes president, Operation Aurora, which would use the authorization or the authority of the Alien Enemies Act of 1898 to get these gangs out of, or was it 1798? It might have been 1798. To get these gangs.
1798, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, to get these gangs out of the United States. I mean, he's in no danger, I don't think, of winning Colorado. But this is a message that will translate across the country.
I think that's right. Look, first of all, I'm not familiar with the statute, and so I'm not certain whether it's applicable. But look, the only reason to be outside of a battleground state at this point is there are only two reasons. One, you can raise a lot of money, and two, you can identify a big issue that's going to have nationwide ramifications. We may remember, for example, in 1984, 1980, Ronald Reagan campaigned on in New Jersey with the Manhattan skyline and the Statue of Liberty in the background. He wasn't going to win New York, he wasn't going to win New Jersey, but he wanted to emphasize the opportunity and the hope of his message. So obviously the former president is going to Aurora, Colorado in order to say we need to do something about these Venezuelan gangs that are terrorizing residents of this city.
I want to ask you about the interview that Tim Walz did with Michael Strahan on Good Morning America. They went to a football field in Minnesota. One of the questions that Strahan asked him was why Kamala Harris did not address the problems that she is highlighting now in the past 3.5 years that she's been the vice president. Listen to his answer and the question.
And something that former President Trump said, something that within your debate they were saying that, hey, these are policies that Kamala Harris could have done 3 years ago when she was in the White House with President Biden, and she never did. What do you say to people who bring that up?
Well, Donald Trump had 4 years to do it, if you're going to talk about that. And what the point is, you need a partner in Congress. You've seen these. We've seen different bills that are ready to pass, and Donald Trump makes sure he steps in. We saw it around immigration, a bipartisan bill, widely respected, wanting to make a difference in this, holding true to our values, securing the border. Donald Trump steps in and says, look, that's going to hurt my political future. Let's not make it happen.
What'd you get out of that?
That he didn't want to answer the question. Look. There is an answer, which is to say, look, she was the vice president. Times change. We're 4 years later. What are the challenges that we have today? We were fighting back in 4 years ago. She and President Biden were trying to help the country recover from COVID. That's been done. So what's the next chapter that we need to work on? And that's why we want to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. It's one thing to bring up and say, well, Donald Trump, he should have done all those things when he was president. But that's not where you start. That may be, the second response. But the first one is, what is it that you're going to do, and give an explanation of why you're doing it now rather than later. We were fighting COVID. Now we got new challenges as a country. That's where we're focused. But he's proving to be a highly entertaining candidate.
Strahan also asked him about the prevarications and I don't want to say outright lies, but some people might, about his background. Listen to this
exaggerations.
There you go.
Well, but it's one thing with trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him even tell the truth about himself. Yeah. What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment. But I think what they see is, if they want to compare that talking about immigration policy or seeing the things that Donald Trump would say, I think there's a big difference than missing a date when you're there and, again, spinning something for political reasons.
I mean, he's called himself a knucklehead, and voters might be rightly asking themselves, who wants a knucklehead a heartbeat away from the presidency?
Yeah. Look, if he just simply said, look, I've misspoken, and I apologize. I understand that, but my, I've been formed by my experiences. Yes, I've mangled dates, and I've put myself in places I wasn't, but it was unintentional, and I wasn't trying to mislead. And, I'm proud of my record as a member of Congress, as governor of an important state. But, yeah, have I misspoken? You bet. And for that, I'm sorry. I mean, move on. People are forgiving, but you got to admit the problem. You can't simply say, I'm still trying to figure out what he was trying to say there, incidentally. But you can't, you got to be direct. And he certainly wasn't.
Well, if you can't decipher it, Karl, I don't know who can. Thank you for joining us, sir. Have a great weekend.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.